Hola, comrades! Today's topic of interest, The Last Jedi. With all the turmoil in the world today, it's comforting to have a Star Wars movie to look forward to. These films show us at our best, our most heroic, our most idealistic, our most ambitious, and our most hopeful. We need these films more now than we did 30, 40 years ago. So I was hoping the new film would deliver, and I was not disappointed. The Last Jedi improves on the solid foundation built by The Force Awakens and delivers a beautiful, shocking, genuinely moving film that I declare to be the best Star Wars film ever made. If The Force Awakens is our generation's A New Hope, The Last Jedi is our generation's The Empire Strikes Back, a bold, confident film that delves deeper into the mythos of its universe and is unafraid to challenge its audience. In honor of it, I'm going to count off the 5 biggest reasons why the film is so great. Before we start, let me note that there are no spoilers to be found here. While I personally have no problem with spoilers, I understand that I'm in the minority, and as this is going up very close to the film's release, I will spoil nothing. Without further ado, number 1, Rian Johnson's direction. When I heard that the great Rian Johnson was going to be directing Episode 8, I was ecstatic. He is one of the most thoughtful, intelligent directors working today, and his skill lends The Last Jedi a stylish, decisive, visual style that both invests deeply in the Star Wars aesthetic and is a step beyond anything the series had showcased up to this point. Unlike J.J. Abrams, the director of A Force Awakens, who for all his strengths as a creator of open, sprawling, grandiose films has a tendency to lapse into empty flashiness, Johnson creates a tight, lean, and yet sumptuous film. His knack for visual storytelling is nigh unmatched, and he depicts anxiety, desperation, and the contrast between hope and hopelessness with amazing deftness. His films are cerebral but never detached from emotion and character. He was the best choice Disney could have made. This was a significant departure from his usual fare, but his style, far from being swallowed up by the monster that is big-budget blockbuster filmmaking, shines through more brilliantly than ever before. It's the best directed Star Wars film ever. Aside from his visual stylings, Johnson manages to get far more out of the actors than Abrams could, bringing out hidden depths that genuinely shocked me. If you don't know who Rian Johnson is, you are missing out. He first made waves in the indie scene with his hard-boiled, neo-noir Brick, then broke into the mainstream with Looper, a cult classic time-travel sci-fi flick that I recommend checking out. But what made me a devotee of his was his work on Breaking Bad. He directed 3 episodes of the show, and they are 3 of the best episodes in the entire program. First, there was Fly, which took an absurd premise and turned it into an emotionally evocative piece of TV. Then there was 51, one of the most underrated episodes of the entire series, and one which showcases my favorite shot of the entire series. Look at that. Last but not least, he directed what many consider to be the greatest episode of TV ever made, Ozymandias. Yeah, he's extremely talented, and his direction alone would be enough to make this movie a must-see. But that's not all The Last Jedi has to offer. Number 2, the story. As I've said before, I'm not going to get into spoilers, but let me just say that the story is very compelling. When The Force Awakens was released, much of the criticism about it centered on how closely it stayed to the formula of A New Hope, and how closely it stayed to series conventions in general. Let me say that I don't expect that'll be a common criticism of this film. The Last Jedi goes, to steal flagrantly from a competing science fiction series, where no Star Wars movie has gone before. It's darker, more thoughtful, more concerned with questions of power and corruption and memory. That's not to say this film turns into a Christopher Nolan Batman movie, and for that I'm thankful. If there's one cardinal virtue of the Star Wars series, it's that despite its many influences, from the pulp sci-fi of the 1940s to the epic war movies of the latter half of the 20th century, to the fantasy blockbusters that dominated the 2000s, the series never feels like it's trying to be anything but itself. In The Last Jedi, there's humor and levity, but it's not awkwardly juxtaposed to the action, as is the case in a lot of Marvel movies. It's not even like a Coen Brothers flick, where darker comedy plays an accompaniment to the gripping drama that takes center stage. A closer parallel would be Johnson's work on Breaking Bad. That show took itself extremely seriously from season 2 onward, but it always had time for comedic bits. One of the best examples is Johnson's first episode of Breaking Bad, Fly, which took a ridiculous idea for an episode, Walter White trying to kill a fly that infiltrated his lab, and played it straight, but regularly acknowledged the absurdity of the situation. The comedy isn't juxtaposed to the drama, or even an accompaniment to it. Rather, it's an extension of that drama. The Last Jedi isn't quite as deft at that, but it follows the same formula, and it follows it quite effectively. Let me say this, The Last Jedi is one of the most emotionally wrenching movies I've watched this year. If you're a Star Wars fan, you're going to check this out regardless of what I say, but you're definitely in for a treat. And if you're not a Star Wars fan, I suggest you check this out anyway. It's a true marvel. Number 3. The acting. Contrary to what Alfred Hitchcock famously said, actors are not cattle. They are not as important to films as you would guess if you obsessed over those inane celebrity gossip shows, but they do matter. Sorry if I'm talking about Breaking Bad too much, but that show would have not been what it was without Bryan Cranston and Aaron Paul. In the same vein, Mad Men would not have been what it was without Jon Hamm and Elizabeth Moss. While The Last Jedi does not feature acting of that caliber, its actors do turn in scintillating performances. Daisy Ridley is more comfortable as Rey than she was in The Force Awakens, and Adam Driver does a lot more with Kylo Ren, though admittedly he is given more to work with. The true highlight, however, has to be Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker. If you haven't heard much from Hamill since the original trilogy, it's probably because you don't watch as much animation as I do. He played the Joker in Batman, the animated series, the evil Colonel Muska in Castle in the Sky, and Ozai in Avatar: The Last Airbender. However, this might be his best performance yet. Hamill isn't exactly a great actor, but his performance here as a disgraced hero struggling with failure is great. It's as relatable as it is aching with emotion, barely contained behind a reluctant facade. Number 4. The cinematography. Given that it's a Star Wars movie, calling the cinematography stunning is stating the obvious. Every film in the series, even the CGI bloated prequels, were full of lush imagery and imaginative worlds, and more importantly, they were not afraid to analyze those worlds and find images that fit the emotional tone of the film and the mood of the characters. But The Last Jedi goes an extra step. If I had to sum up the cinematography in one word, that word would be piercing. At 2.5 hours, this is the longest Star Wars movie ever, but while most movies of that length have a tendency to overstay their welcome, The Last Jedi never lets up. Some of that is in the writing, but without the precise, dense cinematography, this film would feel slightly overstretched. The closest comparison I can make is to Blade Runner 2049, another stellar sci-fi movie released this year, but while the images in The Last Jedi aren't as thematically dense as those in Blade Runner 2049, they are far more atmospheric and exact. Not a shot is wasted. Number 5. Carrie Fisher. Okay, maybe this one is cheating slightly. If I were playing fair, I would have included her in the acting section, but I don't think any of you will hold this against me. Forever tied to one of the most iconic roles in the history of cinema, Ms. Fisher has only grown more revered since her tragic and untimely death almost 1 year ago at the age of 60. I never would have guessed that of the 3 main leads in the original Star Wars trilogy, she would be the first to die. The Last Jedi is Fisher's last appearance in film, and it's a good one. Seeing new movies released that star deceased actors is undoubtedly a disorienting experience. I wasn't sure what to make of Philip Seymour Hoffman's appearance as Plutarch in the last two Hunger Games flicks, both released after his death, or Paul Walker's appearance in Furious 7. But Fisher's appearance as Leia in The Last Jedi is more comforting. She's not as important to the story as Rey or Finn, but she has a crucial role to play nonetheless. What I'm saying is that as much as I hate that Ms. Fisher had to die so early, I'm glad that her last film was a Star Wars movie, and specifically that it was this Star Wars movie. She was a genuine icon, and she deserves the great send-off she receives here. So there you have it. 5 reasons why this is the best Star Wars movie ever. Yes, I would put it above Empire, and I adore Empire. I could conjure up another 5 reasons on short notice if I had to. This film is a true monument to the power blockbuster filmmaking can have if all those involved dedicate themselves to making a product that will last, a product that has artistic value, a product that will not only excite people but make a space in their hearts. It is undeniably strenuous work, and it requires a grasp of the inner workings of great art that is hard to attain, but the rewards are worth the struggle, as this film demonstrates. I'm looking forward to the last film in this Star Wars trilogy, but more than that, I'm looking forward to the new trilogy of Star Wars films being developed by Johnson. I'm sure they will be spectacular. Johnson understands what Star Wars is about more than any director the series has ever had, and yes, I'm including Lucas. But the film's triumph isn't just a testament to his skill, but to all the great comrades who worked to realize this brilliant work of art. Anyway, if you liked what you saw today, consider donating to my Patreon so I can produce even more amazing content. Also, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that interstellar stuff. Adios, comrades!